I think the way you should actually think about language models personally is that we don't teach rules to models, right? And we don't teach them in the English language that there's a subject and a predicate and an adjective and where they fit in the sentence. It rather knows that in context from the information or data that it's pulling in, right? From scraping the web and Wikipedia and whatever other sources that they may use to train those models. So when you scale it out to a problem like robotics, well, how does it learn those rules, right? How does it know what to do with a robot or the actuator, the sensor, whatever piece of the robotic system that you want to dive into, and there are many to dive into, how does it learn those things without seeing those examples before? And I think if you were to correlate that back up, is there a Wikipedia-size version of robotic examples on sensors or actuators or the way robotic arms should move and operate with humans in the room? There probably is not a large data set there. And so I think these models, as Brannon, I again agree with, said, they'll continue to develop. We'll need to continue to put more data into them, and they'll really continue to evolve to hopefully move that accuracy number up. And in the long tail, that efficiency number down, or I guess higher, more efficient. But again, I think that takes time. I don't think that happens overnight, and certainly doesn't happen in complex industries like robotics or other places where that can exist. The only other thing I would add to that thought would be, I do think there will be advancements in semiconductors that enable the change here from a strictly power perspective. AI acceleration is a very large market. Alicorp is invested in that market to be fully transparent. But as chips get better and are able to process specifically large language model data sets, right, whether machine learning, et cetera, that will actually enable power to come down and efficiency will rise from that. Now, implementation will be really important. Where does that get implemented and who feels the end effects of that? Is it the OpenAI or is it the end customer that's using OpenAI? I think that's yet to be determined. But semiconductors will play an important part there, I think, in reducing power and therefore increasing efficiency.
You cannot discount the value of personal connection. And I know that might not be a particularly modern or hiked up point of view, but I still believe that at the end of the day, people buy from people. And that personal connection that you create is not something that you're going to be able to replace one for one through robotics and AI. I genuinely don't believe that. If I just think about when I go out and I speak at a conference, I'll get on stage, I'll do my thing, and then inevitably I'll have literally 30 to 40 people come up to me afterwards, saying, hey, that was interesting. Can we talk? All sorts of interesting, engagements. And literally within the space of those 7 minutes, I probably build stronger relationships with real people than, 7 weeks sending out cold emails to a bunch of people hoping that somebody responds, right? So it's difficult to imagine that AI is going to be something that's going to replace the personal touch in selling. I can imagine that it will make the process of outreach more efficient. But at the end of the day, it's going to still have to be about having a very clear focused offer message that targets a specific problem, creating a structured approach to reaching customers and tracking your performance to see how effective you are. So those aren't going to change just because there's some robotic approach there that's making it easier.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area. And I think my main headspace around it has always been wisdom. The knowledge of whether you should do that thing or should not do that thing is most keenly honed off the back of failures or mistakes. I think, we can't help but be in a position where technology development will be just dramatically outpacing our wisdom. We can do our best to say, oh, that feels scary. We should limit, we should regulate, et cetera, et cetera. But human beings are incredibly creative, both in their ability to come up with technology and in their ability to come up with things they shouldn't be coming up with or use cases they shouldn't be coming up with. So whether it's AI accidentally turns around and says, hang on, humans aren't a good thing on this planet, or whether it's someone, more of a malicious actor using things in a way that they shouldn't be used, it's a really difficult space, both to regulate, to manage, to make sure that you aren't restricting innovation, that you aren't putting too tight of a fist around it, because some of these technologies have unbelievable capabilities in terms of improvement of human health or health of the planet. But there's always going to be the other side of them, gene editing, engineering, etc., can do a huge amount of good for us. It could also do an equal or maybe much greater amount of bad for us. And as those sorts of technologies become maybe not household technologies at the moment, but as they become more accessible, lower cost to access, it increases that lowering of that barrier, increases the likelihood that they are misused or mismanaged or misappropriated in some way. And I think at the moment, humanity doesn't have a good model or mechanism for how we treat that. Our regulatory agencies, I don't believe, are capable of moving at the speed that they need to move at. And it's a very different thing. Regulatory agency is it safe to put in the marketplace? Not how do we protect it so that it doesn't develop down a pathway that we can't wind back the clock on. There isn't really a group that is responsible for doing that. And I think we talked about last time, when they brought Mark Zuckerberg into Congress or the Senate or wherever they brought him into, they shouted at him for doing bad social media things. Like the lack of technology awareness, computer savviness, even just how the internet works, knowledge among the senior politicians and decision makers was evident, right? And I mean, that's software, right? Like software's easy by comparison. Software's been around for 50 years. Like we've only just started getting our hands on the really difficult stuff to understand, like whether it's, I don't want to pick on any particular field because then it makes that one feel particularly dangerous. But so we'll just go back to the other one and say bioengineering or something like that. The capabilities of something just in that space alone, like we don't have enough experts out there working on it, let alone acting as regulatory advisors back to central governments to help them come up with policies that protect people and countries and establishments and things like that. It's a really hard space to look after. And I think I want to be an optimist about it. I am an optimist about it. But I also am aware that it only takes one to really take what could have been amazing, fantastic, world-changing technology and put a permanent black mark across it. How we look after that, I'm not really sure.
But then also what happens is you have one person who puts out the first piece of jazz music and it doesn't actually look like what jazz became, right? Because you have somebody else who's got their own AI model trained on their own experiences who take that in and then spit out something else. And so when you think about like the entire network of artists who are creating to kind of create a cultural movement to something that truly becomes innovative, it's not just one individual who's pushing it forward. There are so many people, so many famous jazz artists who we say, oh, he was the father of jazz. No, Miles Davis was the father of jazz. No, Louis Armstrong, right? On and on and on. And if you were to try to create basically that computational complexity across an entire network of people that all have these data sets, and because the brain can do it, people can do it at such low power, right, in so many different contexts, the problem starts to look a little bit more intractable to me when you look at how innovation is kind of built on itself over time. Now, still could happen. I think that might mean maybe it happens slower if you had robots trying to create jazz music. But I guess to your point, I suppose it could happen. It just seems like it'd be tough to get the full confluence of things that need to happen at once, my opinion.
It depends on what you talk about when you're saying replace Google. I don't think that's necessarily the objective. You need to think, what does Google actually do for us? It's being able to access information. So what would AI necessarily replace with Google? Is it still querying, or it would be more interesting if the AI brought the information to you without you wanting it at the right moments? Now that would be cool if you had systems which are able to help you with the chores or anticipate what you need and help you do your job better. I see AI much more as an expander of what we're capable of doing than a replacement of people. And I see AI really, well, we call it the co-pilot aspect of things. We don't see it as necessarily replacing people. We see it as enabling people to do more than they could before. And that's what technology is supposed to do. And I think AI is supposed to do that too. But it should be companionship. It should be the ability to work with machines rather than be afraid of being replaced by machines. Mm-hmm. I think if you replace people with computers, at one point the computers are just going to have people problems.